Thank you and good afternoon. Liberation, freedom, breakthrough, revolution. Are there more exciting words than these in our language? When I say to you, I have been liberated, I am freed, can you not help but to not only sense my excitement, but to begin to feel it yourself? Ignite, foment, empowerment. Exciting words themselves, no doubt. But these are words of action. These are words which, in their utterance, not merely imply, but still further cause movement. The, these are words that their very use instills and becomes the kindling that starts the fire, that is motion, that is impact, that is change. Liberation, freedom, breakthrough, and revolution are nothing without a motivation that sparks an idea, that ignites a cause, that foments a movement that empowers a generation. That, my brothers and sisters, that is why we are here today, to not only commemorate, but to celebrate Juneteenth, the realization of a need for liberation that this day has ignited, the God given right of all citizens to embrace and enjoy freedom that is fomented beyond the borders of the state of Texas. But instead, all citizens can embrace and enjoy freedom throughout the borders of this nation. And the empowerment, the breakthrough, the revolution that we have found from the days of the antebellum South through the civil rights movement and up to today's overwhelming calls, demonstrations, and advocacy for social and economic justice via equity, not just equality. Equity, equality. We hear these words a lot today, don't we? No matter your politics, no matter your interpretation of social issues, or the paradigms we confront the realities of these two words every single day. Juneteenth was a tremendous equalizer. There's that base word, equal. Juneteenth brought down onto Texas that last holdout of the South in the Civil War, a tremendous reckoning. All Black men, women, and children are free. But was that equality? Freedom was declared by decree, by rule of law. But was that equality in the eyes of the law? Dred Scott. If this was an auditorium, this is the part where I would ask, who here knows about Dred Scott? And ask you to raise your hands. Bonus points if you could tell me a year. Dred Scott versus Sanford was a Supreme Court decision that held that a slave was to be a slave no matter where in the country he resided, no matter where in the county he sought refuge, be it an abolitionist state or a slave state. Injustice cannot begin to describe the repulsiveness of this ruling from our highest court. Dred Scott was decided in 1857, a mere 8 years prior to Juneteenth, which itself again was just a military order, holding that all enslaved people are now free. Juneteenth, as a single solitary order, was butting up against almost 100 years of legal precedent in this country, outlined in our very Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of that sacred governing document that held that non-freed persons account for only 3/5 of a person, 3/5 of a vote, 3/5 of representation. Equality at its very base means the same. Equal rights means same rights. Equal protection means same protection. The quest for equality was not achieved by Juneteenth. It was fomented by Juneteenth. And it has not been an easy plight. For victory by the formerly enslaved as well as their champions, we have all suffered setbacks as a people as well as a nation. But we continue to push ever onward and ever forward. Ratification of the 13th Amendment, the abolition of slavery, brought to you by Juneteenth, The nullification and dissolving of the Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 in the letter of the law brought liberation, freed all people. But what then? Reconstruction of the South, the installation of Jim Crow elements such as the poll tax, and measures requiring reading comprehension in foreign languages for persons of color. Plessy versus Ferguson. Who here knows Plessy versus Ferguson? Another Supreme Court ruling, another grave injustice and affront to the notion of equality. It was a Plessy decision that made separate by equal not merely defensible, but constitutional. As our elders would tell us, and as media and photographs from this area illustrate to us, separate is not equal. So what of our victories? Just as was the case with one military order freeing the enslaved by one decree, effectively erasing 100 years of poorly guided legal precedent, to include a clause in the holiest of legal holies, our Constitution. It does not take much. Brown versus the Board of Education eliminated separate but equal. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 ratified and guaranteed equal protections and equal access of skin color, religious belief. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 not only was our right to vote protected, but we started to vote politicians into government who actually represented our interests and happened to look like us. The Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act, we were free and legally protected to live where we want. I would be remiss if I were not to point out that the beginning of this little history lesson of ours, we started with Dred Scott, who fled his slave state seeking to live in a free state. And here I pause to say, legislation written in 1968 says we are free, no matter where we have been and no matter where we choose to be. Juneteenth declared an enslaved people as free nearly 100 years later. 1968 saw legislation enforcing and ensuring the freedom of all people simply to reside where they choose, nearly 100 years later. Now, what does that mean? Am I trying to depress us? Change only comes every 100 years or so. No, each of these victories required a revolution. Juneteenth followed an actual war being waged, but the justice, Thurgood Marshall, taught us that the legal system can and will work in our favor. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that change can be effectuated without violence. And the president, Barack Obama, taught us that yes, we can, and yes, we did. No matter how daunting, no matter the odds, no matter the opposition, goodwill always triumphs over evil. Justice will always prevail. It may take time, it may take generations, but it will come. Tremendous swells of motivation, of restlessness, of insistence, of sheer and unrelenting will has motivated each of the catalytic changes that I have named in this journey of American writing itself, of America doing what is right by all her citizens, whether born here or brought here. Juneteenth is significant, wholly and unmistakably significant, because it was the beginning, the motivation, the ignition, the fomentation of a revolution that has become what we understand today to be equality. Now, where are we and where do we need to be? Though that may sound rhetorical, though I cannot ask each one of you directly, I'm asking each one of you to have an honest and sincere moment and ask, are we where we need to be? I can upset half of this country with 4 words: social justice, police reform. That is not my intent today. This presentation of mine is not to share my view on either. I assure you, I have some. Nor will I attempt to sway or influence you to take up my views. That a person of color, born and raised in a majority city, me, who is old enough to have experienced separate but equal, and fortunate enough to have lived long enough not to only see my country elect an African American president, but to cast a vote and write my name for that man as a Texas delegate at the Democratic National Convention, not once, but twice. My city, my state, and my country each come a significant way just in my relatively short lifetime. But my purpose as I sit before you today is to tell you how, it's not to tell you how to feel, but it's to ask you for yourself. Are we where we need to be? If your answer, yours and yours alone, is no, I ask only, what are you going to do about it? As I said before, Juneteenth was only the beginning. As a foundation, it has become the bedrock upon which we have established every legal and societal claim that we are a free people and we are afforded all the rights, protections, and guarantee of any other free people occupying this land within our national boundaries. But a foundation, no matter the structure, it only provides a foothold. Legislation after legislation, decision after decision, and movement after movement, we have built striving for equality. But is this enough? What about equity? As I mentioned in my opening, one of the great prides of both my personal and professional career was my appointment to serve as chair of the MLK Commission and March. Despite a worldwide pandemic this year we've been experiencing that has claimed more than 500,000 lives, millions internationally, we kept that dream alive and made a virtual march. Remember what I said, no matter the opposition, no matter how daunting, it's not just a theory. I generally hold that view. And some messages, some missions, some purposes are just too large to silence, even for an international crisis. Over the course of my career, my life really, I have given many speeches, addresses, and opinions on the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., his legacy, and how it became, for me, as an East Sider, such as myself, growing up, organizing what has become the largest march in the nation under the Reverend R.A. Callis, to chairing that commission myself. One note I enjoy sharing with people in my various speeches or addresses is something that is often overlooked. History forgets what led the Reverend Dr. King to that Memphis balcony that god awful day when he was assassinated. Dr. King had shifted and expanded his focus from social justice to economic justice. He was in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting sanitation workers engaged in a strike seeking higher wages for their African American employees. It is for this reason that the march in San Antonio includes sanitation workers and vehicles in its assembly to give credence and honor to this fact. More history for you. Back in 1831, the abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison said, money begates influence, and influence respectability. Still true to this day, wouldn't you agree? Is it any wonder that someone with the impact, fervor, and influence of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would focus on economic conditions of the quote, unquote, newly equal? Equality is about how we start. Equity is about how we finish. We cannot be so blind that we cannot allow ourselves to be so naive as to ignore the fact that we do not all start in the same place in life. And I'm not talking about personal decisions. I'm not talking about influences that have an individual choices to bring down upon themselves. I am talking about the social economic factors beyond our control, created directly and wholly by a system which immorally, unethically, and unjustifiably enslaved the people and perpetuated a sense of inferiority among its citizens regarding something as nominal as skin pigmentation. Money begetting influence, begetting respectability. We all know that, and I will be the first to tell you, The playing field is not level. No matter the legislation, no matter the studies, no matter the political influence I have attained over the last 40 years fighting the good fight, there are systemic issues that have created an environment that no matter our equality as a people, it is not equitable as citizens in the same society. But no matter how daunting, no matter the odds, no matter the opposition, I know that good will always trounce evil. Justice will always prevail. And I have committed myself to equitable outcomes, equitable distribution of resources, equitable representation in the decision making process with stakeholders at every level to ensure that every boundary, every obstacle, every effort to slow progress and prevent the very notion of fairness in my marketplace, around the country, or around the world. You see, I know my role, I know my purpose, and this is it. I work to ensure not just equal, but equitable opportunities. As Garrison said, money begate money to begate influence, to begate respectability. When I accepted this was my purpose, I asked myself, are we where we need to be? And I would have to say tell you no. But that's not the answer that matters, is it? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And it is not a remember when. Juneteenth is a constant reminder that where we start is not where we finish. Our work is yet to be done. Juneteenth is only a beginning. Our promises of a better, equitable tomorrow have not yet been realized. Liberation, freedom, breakthrough, revolution. These require a spark, a motivation to ignite, to foment, and to empower people for a change. Now, what are you going to do about it? Thank you.